Right. It is lights out and away we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 53 of the HOS F1 podcast. Of course, I'm your host, Adrian Huff, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, RJ McCullough. What's up, RJ?
Hello, Adrian. Yes, mustache is looking nice. It'd be a real shame if you had to get rid of that thing in the wheel today, but
It would be.
yeah, all in all, we're not going to waste much time bantering this week because we have a lot to talk about. That was a crazy Australian Grand Prix. Obviously very happy to see Hamilton on the podium again. We'll get into that. Yeah, lots to talk about, so let's just get right into it if you want to, unless you got anything you want to bring up.
No, let's jump into it. Are we going to... Oh, yeah, we're going to start with your 1-minute race review. Excellent.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I haven't done a run-through. I did have time to write a few notes down, but I don't know how I'm going to do for time, so...
You want me to handle the timer?
Yes.
All right, I got that right here.
Okay.
All right, I'll count you down.
All right.
Make sure we're aiming the camera. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, go.
All right, Australian Grand Prix. Max Verstappen started on pole, but George Russell took the lead into turn 1. Hamilton then passed Verstappen. Verstappen was angry. Mercedes 1-2 at the moment, and Leclerc just after that goes off into the gravel. Safety car comes out. Leclerc DNF. Lap 7, Albon also DNFs. Safety car turns into a red flag. Russell gets screwed because he pitted for different tires. They restart on lap 10. Hamilton, Verstappen, Alonso. Lap 12, Max with the DRS cruises past Lewis. Lap 47, it was going pretty well till lap 47. Then Max goes on the grass but gets away with it. Lap 54, Kevin Magnussen hits the wall. We got a red flag again. Lap 57 out of 58, we have a restart. That turns into a huge crash. Sainz takes out Alonso. The Alpines take each other out. Just carnage everywhere. Lap 58, we have the final lap under safety car. They use the grid from the previous restart. Sainz gets a 5-second penalty, which drops him completely out of the points. We end with Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso, Stroll, and then Perez 20th to 5th.
Oh my God, that was impressive. You stayed calm. You stayed cool and collected.
I know. It's a good thing you had the clock that I could see, because otherwise I would have been screwed. But yeah, I looked up and I saw I had a good 15 seconds. I was like, oh, okay, I'm good.
Yeah. Honestly, you were almost 30 seconds in. I was like, how is he going to get through this? But you got it. Hell yeah.
And I skipped from lap 12 to lap 47 because that was just nothing much other than Max pulling ahead. And there were some good midfield battles, but didn't have time to get into those.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so very nice job. Before we discuss our full Australian GP conversation, I'm going to spin the punishment wheel because if you're not familiar, we have a little F1 fantasy league that me and RJ do, just the two of us for our podcast. And if one of his drivers gets a win, I have to do a punishment. There's certain Max won, he's on your team obviously, so I've got a Red Bull chug. All the drivers showed their favorite food or drink in that one Formula 1 video. We sometimes will do a punishment based off that. You know the drill if you've been watching or listening. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and spin it. And this is unfortunately already getting to be a familiar feeling, even though you've had to spin once already. And I was low-key really hoping for this one. I'm doing a full Australian GP in F1 2022. So
that's twice now that you've got the full GP.
It is, but I'm way happier about doing it in Australia than Bahrain, though. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, Australia.
A lot more fun.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's more fun than Bahrain. I will agree to that.
Oh my gosh, yes. But I mean, there's lots of quick turns, and it can be a little sketchy overtaking sometimes. Clearly, as we saw in this week's Grand Prix, I mean, it was just absolute pandemonium. Do you want to go through our fantasy league before we continue, though?
Speaking of overtaking.
Oh no.
After race 2, Adrian was ahead by 3 points. After race 3, RJ's ahead by 21 points.
Damn.
Big race for Team RJ on this one. Yeah. Don't really have the breakdown necessarily because I did it. I'm just doing it by season points.
Sure.
But yeah, somehow I really pulled ahead on you on this one. But I guess if we're looking at, I had the top 2, which always helps, Verstappen, Hamilton, and you had Alonso, and I had Stroll. You have Perez. I have Norris. So
I lost both my Ferraris, though.
You lost the boys. Yeah. So that's
absolute heartbreaking.
That red flag or a 5-second penalty for signs under safety car. That was tough. Tough for you.
Yeah. We'll get into that. It's been a very back and forth weekend for me. Lots of emotions.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess we'll get into the Z race. I think it's better if we just kind of go on some talking points instead of kind of going lap by lap.
Mm-hmm.
If you're good with that. So
yeah,
maybe I'll throw a few ones out there. So first one that comes to mind, I guess, Checo going 20th to 5th. I don't know. I've kind of seen varying takes on this. I've seen some people saying, what a great drive. I think he got driver of the day.
I think,
as voted by the fans. So some people saying, what a great drive. He went 20th to 5th. Other people saying, like, well, they have by far the best car. What would Max have done? And also there was a couple red flags, safety cars, and things that kind of helped him out. Also a ton of DNFs. I think there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 DNFs.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah,
like I saw you tweeted about like Oscar Piastri. Like everyone's like raving how he got his first points, but I mean, 8 guys. There's only 12 guys that finished the race.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but
it's really. I mean, this is going to be a race that I think we'll talk about for a long time. It's a record breaker. This is the most. They've like a Formula One race has never had 3 red flags before.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I mean, just absolute craziness. In the restart. I mean, if you had told me there would have been a 3rd red flag, I would have probably just been more annoyed than anything. But I might have believed it because it's so, as like crazy and sporadic as it is, it's completely predictable that it was going to happen. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, a race start is hectic enough at the start of the race. I mean, you're making drivers do that, multiple times. So we restarted that race 3 times. So it's just, how do you expect them to just get away cleanly every single time? Now, I'm not trying to say that red flags like aren't necessary or anything stupid like that, but it was just like too much.
I think the second one especially was pretty egregious. Like, I think that was when Magnussen went off. And I mean, like all the drivers, they can tell by their reaction, they were all like, I think they showed like a kind of a montage of all of them reacting, and they're all just, they've had to bleep it all out because they're all just like, what the fuck? Like, come on. Especially that late in the race, like it's so hard to, as you said, race starts are so tough, but especially when they all switch to new tires, but they're like cold tires then, so they're not warmed up, and then the clutch is worn, and they're all trying to gain spots at the end of the race. It's just meant for mayhem. And is it entertaining? Yes, but we had hoped that F1 had kind of learned their lesson from going for the entertainment as opposed to the sport aspect of it, and clearly they haven't. I guess in the end they kind of made the right decision, but yeah, I guess instead of Checo, we can really get into that. Like, what's your take on how the FIA handled what was, like, it was funny, as a quick aside, I was reading back through our texts from during the race, and it went, like, the range of emotions. There was one point in the race where, like, I texted you something like, this is why we love F1. Like, this is the best. Like, it was just so entertaining, so exciting. And then by the end of it, we were both kind of pissed off. Like, what's going on here? Like, come on, finish the race. So, yeah, what was your kind of opinion of the FIA this weekend?
Gosh, it's so tough because there's just so many moving parts. I mean, you got to judge them because when things don't go right, there's no one else to blame. Obviously, the FIA are famous for, not always making the best decisions. I just don't think, restarting the race that many times is beneficial or fair. I mean, Pierre Gasly, he lost, so Alpine just lost so much, all because of, I mean, granted, their drivers ran into each other, but I mean, you can't really blame them. It was like Gasly didn't see Ocon, and Ocon, was ahead of Gasly, and he just sort of came over. It just
swiped him.
Yeah, absolute, just wrecked. It sucks. So when something like that happens, you're just like, God. And it was like Jensen Button predicted it when they were doing the last restart. He was like going through. He's like, we really need to give all these drivers credit for where they're at right now, because you never know what could happen on a restart. And he's so right. You know, I think probably my biggest complaint is going to be Sainz, because even though when he knocked Alonso off, I was so pissed, but you know, the whole restart was just craziness. But it was a stupid move. Granted, the FIA did pretty much give him that penalty like almost immediately, and they're famous for like taking their time. So I think they were just, you know, pissed and fed up with everything and having to, you know, end the car or end the race under a safety car again.
Yeah,
they love that. So I did think it was a little unfair. You know, Sainz did mess up, but everybody, especially the fact that Fernando also got his position back, it just seemed so crazy to me for them to, even though it's a 5-second penalty, I mean, it undid his entire race. So completely heartbreaking.
Kind of strange from Sainz's perspective. Like, if they're saying the lap didn't count and they're putting them all back to the spots they were, then you could argue from Sainz's point, like, well, then if it didn't count and they're going back, then how come I'm getting a penalty? And it was such a harmful penalty too. Like, he was in like 4th place and then he dropped all the way down to 12th, something like that. So yeah, it was tough. But also, they gave Sainz the 5-second penalty, but there was 2 other guys. Logan Sargent took out Nick DeVries, and I know it was at the back of the field, but he wiped him right out, and he didn't get a penalty. I forget who the other one was, but it was a little bit unfair from the FIA. And also, I don't know if you saw the picture of Max on the restart, how he lined up. Like, he was... Yeah. There's angles where it looks like he was over the line. He wasn't, because he was... Like, the car is way over the line, but it's the tire, and the tire is just, like, on the very edge. But, like, people showed angles of where they'd given previous penalties out, and it was similar to that. So, the FIA has come out and said Max he didn't break any rules or anything. So, I mean, I was kind of hoping he would, but I guess it wouldn't have made a difference in the end. Well, maybe it would have, because there was a safety car at the end. I don't know. But, yeah, it's kind of a strange weekend for the FIA with their penalties, with the way the race ended. Something I want to get into later, but just having Michael Massey around, that's always an absolute joke, having that guy anywhere near the paddock. So
that's a touchy subject.
Yeah, it is a very touchy subject, and they even had to mention him during the race.
They did. When you have that many red flags, you just got to talk about something. Can't have any.
Every time, especially like it did kind of set up for like it was a similar situation, which is kind of funny to see guys like Sainz complaining so much. I'm like, oh well, you weren't complaining when it happened to Lewis, but
right.
Anyways, that's we've gone over that many a time.
Sure.
But that was kind of the main thing, was where the restarts and the penalties and that shit. Anything else on that?
Not as far as the restarts go, but we can sort of dive more into like the teams specifically. I have to start with, I have a couple of interesting thoughts about Red Bull, but Ferrari are it is so painful to be a Ferrari fan and to be actively cheering for them and rooting for success for that team. It is so painful. I mean, seeing Leclerc get, spun out on the what was that, turn 4? I literally just like tossed the remote aside. I was like, well, there goes a whole chunk of my investment in this race. God damn it. I mean, come on. They cut so quickly. You saw him turn and go back on the gravel, and obviously that was where Sergio Perez got stuck in qualifying. So I didn't have high hopes that he was going to get out, but a couple of drivers did, run off there, and they were able to recover the car and get it out of the gravel. But the gravel trap is there to punish the drivers for making mistakes, so it's understandable. But they cut, and the commentators didn't say anything. They were just like, oh no, Paul Charles Leclerc. And they're like, oh, let's get back to Max Verstappen. But then the whole lap didn't know. And then it cuts and it's like, oh, Charles Leclerc's race is over before it began. It's like, oh my God, kill me.
I didn't know. Like, I thought maybe he had gotten back on track because he was on gravel. But yeah, all of a sudden they're just like, oh, he's out. That
And
was
it's
his worst race start, or tied for his worst
Oh, yeah.
start to a season ever.
Since Sauber.
Yeah. It was like his whole career, so it's definitely his worst start since Ferrari, so yeah, it's been tough, and not really any of it his fault, per se, so.
It's a lot of bad luck, and, I mean, the car, obviously compared to Red Bull, it's not great, but I would put it on par with the Mercedes, or at least maybe right behind them, depending on the track. But, all these cars, fighting for second, third, and fourth, they're all very close. It's Red Bull that are just untouchable. Ferrari have just, especially Leclerc, it is like unbelievable bad luck. But, the FIA did say that was a racing incident. I was pissed off at Stroll, but he's famous for not checking his mirrors. But it was a racing incident. It's one of the first turns in the first lap of the race. Things happen. Leclerc's just got to keep his head down and just keep pushing. The Ferrari, I mean, I know they're going through a transition right now as a team, but they have got to start making improvements. And their strategy calls haven't even been, they haven't had the chance to make a bad strategy call just because they haven't been in the fight. So, it's just been very, just disappointing.
Yeah, they haven't even been close. Sainz was up there in fourth, but only because of, circumstance, not because he was driving that well. I know there's, been some numbers that showed that he had the second best pace at points in the race, but, that's not necessarily his doing. That's just the fact the car's fast. Mm-hmm. I guess the other most disappointing one going into this was McLaren, and they had technically a good sixth for Lando, eighth for Piastri, so technically a good finish. But how much of that do you chalk up to, again, circumstance, and how much of that, or is McLaren maybe turning the corner a bit?
I would say it's mostly circumstance, because neither of them drove particularly well. I mean, Oscar had a couple of decent moments, but honestly, all of the rookies really, really looked like rookies. I think they all had a pretty decent start. Nick De Vries has been the biggest disappointment this season to me, as far as what we thought his potential was at Monza, him getting points, and then, I mean, he is just completely shit the bed thus far. But all the rookies were just really just not at the level where they should be, really making some really basic amateur errors. And I really wish Yuki had a better car, because I just love him so much. He's such a good driver. He is always, he is just one of the best recovery drivers, I think, on the grid. So I was extremely impressed with his performance this season, but that AlphaTauri is just really abysmal. But both of them took some dings this weekend.
They did, and I'm happy for Yuki, because he was on the verge of more than three. I think he finished last year with an 11th as well. So I think 4 straight 11th place finishes, which is just got to be the worst. I know a 10th is only 1 point, but still, that a couple of those moves you up standings when you're at the bottom. So happy that despite Sainz's heartbreak, that Yuki kind of benefited from that. And I mean, I'll be honest, I've kind of written Yuki off as just maybe mediocre, but he's been driving well so far. I've been impressed by him, and I mean, if you just go based off comparing to his teammate, I mean, he's driving so much better than Nick De Vries. I think a lot of that is De Vries is a rookie, and he's maybe not as good as people that hyped him up to be. Shocker, one race doesn't show that much, but I also want to discuss HOS, because they protested after the race to try and get and I think it was an 8-hour review period, because if it would have stood up without so if they would have upheld what happened with Sainz taking out Alonso, then I guess whatever would have happened, Hülkenberg would have finished third.
Yeah.
So it would have been Haas's first podium and Hülkenberg's first podium, I believe.
Yep.
So obviously it would have been big for them. So they protested. They lost that protest, of course. But kind of tough for them. But I mean, kind of hard to feel too bad for them, because it was also Kevin Magnussen that started all the chaos with him just driving like it was kind of weird, like the way it happened. He just like he was driving beside a wall and he just drove too close to the wall, obviously, but the wheel just slid right off. He said he didn't even feel it. He just kept driving. But yeah. Do you feel bad for Haas? Do you feel like they deserve better? I mean, 7th place for Nico is still pretty good, I think.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel bad. It would be so cool for him to get his first career podium, but it's that wouldn't be fair. That's not what should have happened, and the FIA definitely got that one right. Gunther, was very, very angry. The commentators could not stop talking about it. So I feel their pain, but it's not. I'm not calling the FIA wrong on this one for sure.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw Carlos Sainz's post-race interview. He's just like, I'm only doing this, basically pull the march on Lynch. Like, I'm just doing this so I don't get fined. I cannot talk right now. I'm too angry. And they tried asking him to follow up. He's like, no, I cannot talk. And he just walked away. So, I mean, good on him for showing up, but it was kind of funny. I guess, and I can't not bring up Mercedes, especially Lewis. I mean,
yes.
Great week. It's nice to. I can't deny that there was some luck involved, but just on pure pace, like they were very, very close to Aston Martin. You can argue Fernando maybe had a bit more pace, but I mean Lewis held him off the whole race. He never got within DRS. He was really close, but yeah, really good. And who knows? As much as I don't really love George, I have to admit he got shafted a little bit this race because he had an incredible start. Like he was pulling out a huge gap for any car to Red Bull, the biggest gap we've seen just off the start. And then there were some race issues, obviously, that brought the field back together, the safety cars and restarts and all that stuff. And then he had an engine issue, which Mercedes, very rare for them to have reliability issues. So tough for George, but really great for Lewis. It was really exciting. There's a few... I knew that Mercedes wasn't going to be able to, or Lewis wasn't going to be able to hold Max off, but it's still exciting. And even just to see him being able to stay ahead of Fernando. Again, I guess it's kind of similar question to McLaren, but obviously a more positive outlook. Like when you look at Mercedes from an unbiased perspective, or a less biased than I am, do you see this as 3 options, I guess? 1, they were sandbagging about how bad they were, and they're actually not that bad. 2, they've made quick developments, and they are at least up there with Aston Martin and Ferrari. Or 3, this was just kind of a lucky one-off, and they're way behind Red Bull. But in terms of the 2, 3, 4 pecking order, where do you kind of see this putting them?
I would say probably the second option you said. I don't think they've been sandbagging their performance. I think they've just managed to kind of start turning the car around, because compared to all the cars except Red Bull, you could argue that they have the fastest car on the grid, because it's a close battle between 2 through 4 right now. That being said, yeah, they're still nowhere near Red Bull. That start, though, was just beyond exciting. George taking the lead, my opinions on George are what they are, but I was happy to see him and Lewis at a 1-2. Max falling back to 3rd. I was like, holy shit, what? I was like just completely shocked, not expecting that whatsoever. And, of course, the safety car and red flag just absolutely screwed him over. And, of course, the DNF was the cherry on top for destroying his race. But, yes, Lewis did great. And Fernando even gave him props on social media, because he couldn't catch him. He gave him, his due credit, because he absolutely killed it. And I think if Lewis, had a car even somewhat close to Red Bull, it would just be such a stellar season. But to sort of transition to Red Bull, pretty much the only thoughts I have about Red Bull are that car is so good that they're having to sandbag. They are, Red Bull's sandbagging, because Max is, you could hear him talk to his engineer, because the engineer was basically telling him to pick up the pace, and Max, but, at the same time, Max is I'm sure him and Christian, they're not stupid. He's like, I can't be getting a lap on these guys, which is what he was doing for like 3 or 4 laps. Then he started to just keep and hold that gap. But when he holds that gap at like 4 to 6 seconds and not, push the car to the level that it can hit and just get that gap going crazy, it makes his tires get extremely cold. So he's like constantly complaining about having cold tires, and he's constantly trying to get heat into his tires, and it's because he can't give 100% in that car because it's just so goddamn fast.
Yeah, it's insane.
It is, and it all comes together after the race. All the puzzle pieces sort of come together. He didn't have a good race start, obviously, but I was so shocked because it just doesn't seem like a Max thing to do. I mean, I go back to Mexico 2021 when he just absolutely like put everything on the line for that first turn and flew past Hamilton and Bottas. I'm like, that is the T1 Max that I remember. And of course, everybody they have bad race starts. I'm not saying he needs to dive bomb every inside corner on the first turn of every race, but him just sort of letting both Mercedes get past with relative ease, I was just like, wow. But then it clicked with me. I'm like, oh, this motherfucker knows he's going to get past them within a couple of laps. He's just going to be like, we're going to turn up the heat. I will get past them at some point. And
exactly.
That's kind of hilarious to me, but it's also just like, what the hell? I mean, people are...
a bit of maturity from him.
Oh, absolutely, for sure. It's definitely a sign of maturity because, I mean, if I was in the fastest car and, Max is one of the best drivers on the grid, I'm sure in the back of his mind he wants to pull out. He wants to finish the race, 45 seconds ahead of Hamilton. But he also knows that's probably not the best plan for the business of F1, the entertainment of F1, and his team, and just everything all around. So, Red Bull could be so far ahead by the end of this. I think it could be it already is. I forgot what statistic I saw, but this is like, I think besides one of Mercedes' years, this is the most points ever had by a Constructors team in the first 3 races. And they had a start from the pit lane. It's like...
Yeah, and a 15th start from Max.
Yeah, and a 15th start. It's like, oh my God.
It was funny that even though Max did show maturity by backing off, like not going as aggressive on lap 1, he still couldn't resist getting angry that Lewis passed him. And I'll have more on that in a sec, but... yeah, it was kind of funny, like you mentioned, that they're not showing their true pace because, he was up by like 8.5 seconds, and then he just happened to, go off into the grass a little bit and blamed his brakes locking up, and then so they went down to like 4.5, 5 seconds, and then he quickly got it back up to like 7.5, and they were getting, I think they said they were getting 2.5 to 3 tenths with DRS, and obviously Max only had it a few times because he was ahead most of the race, but like that's insane to be gaining that much on guys that are like just on like a straight getting that much. But I mean, I don't know if he went off on purpose or anything, but like they do kind of keep in mind their gap by how much they're winning by. Like even George said, like I think he directly said Red Bull's sandbagging because they're almost embarrassed by how much they're ahead by.
Yeah,
because they don't want to. If they do show it, then they're gonna get. F1's going to try and clamp things down a little bit because it just wouldn't be exciting at all. But yeah, back to lap 1 when Max got passed by Lewis, and then Max came on the radio and said that Lewis pushed him off. Mm-hmm. Easy for me to say. But yeah, and then after the race, he said something like, "Oh yeah, with that guy, they just don't enforce the rules the same," something like that. So he still holds that grudge towards Lewis.
Yeah.
I think even the announcers came on and said that it was just like racing. It was nothing. It was just a racing incident. So, yeah. What do you think of that? Because it's kind of par for the course with Max, but.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think as a Max fan?
Anytime Max and Lewis go wheel to wheel, there's going to be a radio message that we'll talk about on this show.
Yeah. It makes it every time.
I mean, it's just a typical. I mean, it wasn't even a racing incident. It was just an aggressive move. I think Max has forgotten what it's like to be pushed a little bit.
Right.
So, I mean, I think if Red Bull were to like just fumble the bag, and if 2026 they just have an actual shit box, he could just up and leave. I mean, he's probably so accustomed to winning. He's not used to anybody fighting him, so he's probably immediately is just like, oh, that's got to be wrong. That's got to be wrong.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's nuts. I mean, I guess we can go to the standings now because we've pretty much gone through every team. There's not really too much more. We've already touched on. Yeah, it sucks for Sainz going from potentially third or fourth to
Big
literally
time.
last place, but that's what you get. It was like he did take him out, but you can make the case like they kind of let everyone else off. So yeah, just looking at the driver standings here. I won't go through all of them.
Cool.
I see two guys that don't have points: Logan Sargent and Nick DeVries.
Shocker.
They're rookies. Yeah. Right here.
I'm such
Alright,
an
so Max. Alright, Max Verstappen is obviously first place at a nice 69. Then Perez, so we got 1-2 Red Bulls, of course, 54. Alonso 45, and then Lewis up to fourth at 38. And then it's already dropping off. But Sainz fifth at 20, tied with Lance Stroll, 20, and then George Russell seventh at 18, and then everyone else is in single-digit points. So Lando, Nico Hulkenberg, and then 10th place. Tied for ninth, Nico Hulkenberg and Charles Leclerc. Who would have thunk it when you picked Charles first overall in the draft?
My first
He's
pick
now
is 10.
tied with Nico. He's tied with the Hulk.
Hulk.
Man, there was
Hulk.
so
Charles Leclerc
everyone,
is
but
tied
as I
with
said,
Hulk.
everyone has points. Luckily, Yuki got some points, so everyone has points except for Logan Sargent and Nick DeVries.
Wow.
I'm sure they'll get there eventually. I mean, the Williams is showing some. I'm having a tough day speaking today. The Williams is showing some signs. Like it has really good straight line speed. I think it's just they got to figure out their setups and their reliability. But the AlphaTauri doesn't look great. I think there's rumors that AlphaTauri is going to sell. They're not going to be named AlphaTauri for much longer, which I think is a good move.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not really even being the rep. It was weird because a few years ago they were like getting regular not even regular points, but they were like getting almost podiums. Like Gasly was like a chance for a podium, and then just the last 2 years, ever since the regulation changes, just brutal.
It's massively disappointing, especially like you said. I mean, you think back to when Pierre Gasly literally won a race in that car. So I just hope that Yuki is able to secure a drive somewhere because he's able to do some really great things in that crappy car. So I just want to see what he can do in a decent car.
I agree. I think he's definitely worthy, and I think he will. If not with them, I think he'll stay in F1 at the very least. But I thought the same about Mick Schumacher. So actually, Toto had some interesting comments today about Mick. I don't know if you heard that.
I did not.
Paraphrasing, but he was asked about the way Mick was treated at Haas, and he said basically that he disagrees with a lot of it, and that if Michael were around and in the paddock, he thinks there's no way that Haas and Gunther would have treated Mick the way that they did. So, interesting. He said basically like that Mick is just like a great kid and he was raised like so well and et cetera, et cetera. He didn't deserve to be treated like that. But yeah, saying like if Michael was around, he wouldn't be treated this way. Like, it's pretty harsh words.
If Michael was around, he wouldn't be at Haas.
Yeah, exactly.
He'd
He'd also
be in the
like
Ferrari.
probably objectively be a little bit better because he would have his dad's guidance, right?
Yeah,
So
that's
it's sad.
Yeah, very sad.
But it's nice to see that he's doing well. Seems to be happy. We haven't even mentioned Daniel Ricciardo yet.
Yeah, right.
He was just his like little like I'm gonna basically call him cameos. Like they would just pop to him when there was like a quiet moment in the race every like 20-30 minutes, and 3 seconds later he would notice the camera on himself, and he'd always just give a smile or a little something. It's an easy laugh, but I laughed every time. Like it gets me every time. I love the guy. Seems like he's finally happy. He's lost some weight. He's looking good. He's smiling. So, and he's also talking about a return to F1. So that's good.
I hope so.
Yeah. Anything else on the driver standings before we do the constructors?
Gosh, I had one point that I wanted to make, but I cannot for the life of me remember it. So if I do, we can circle back to it. But otherwise,
I have one question for you.
Okay.
What do you think the chances are that someone other than Sergio Perez finishes second this year?
Oh, I think it's very unlikely. I think Checo's proven that he's not. I definitely don't think he's going to be able to challenge Max in any way for the championship, but in that car, he's going to easily take second. I mean, those guys are going to be so far gone, it's just not even going to be fun to talk about.
Yeah. I mean, we've only seen them have one race where they've actually both started from normal race position, and they're still basically 60 points up already.
That's crazy.
I mean, that's quick math. It's probably wrong, but whatever 123 minus 65 is, that's how much they're up already. So it's crazy. Like, they're basically double already. So
I think it's 58.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
I think so.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So yeah, if you have the constructors up, you can go through them.
Yep. Of course, Red Bull's leading, 123 points. Then we've got Aston Martin, 65. 3 podiums thus far. Absolutely amazing. Mercedes following them, 56, 9 points behind. Then you've got Ferrari with 26 points. 6 of those are from McLaren. McLaren, shockingly, P5. That will not hold. They've got 12 points. Alpine are P6. They've got 8 points. Haas, P7 with 7. Alfa Romeo, 8 with 6. Alfa Tauri, 9th with 1 point. And Williams, 10th with 1 point.
Yes, 1 point tied. Shocking. Yeah, McLaren. Yeah, I would say Alpine will definitely pass McLaren. Like, that's Alpine. That's another thing we didn't really talk too much about, I guess. We touched on it, but Gasly, like, amazing race for him. He was up there in like fourth and fifth. He was battling with Sainz like all race, just driving amazing. Tough loss for him. But yeah, they're definitely going to pass McLaren at this rate. It's tough because, I mean, as much as we kind of said Oscar's drive was a little bit, the points were a little bit faulty. Like, he has, I'd say, been the most. I don't know. This is, I guess, a topic of debate we can have. Do you think he's been the best rookie so far? Because I would say he has. It's not like anyone's been spectacular, but I definitely think he's been the best.
Yeah.
Despite the shitty car.
Yeah, definitely. Piastri just makes me think, like, what would he be doing in the Alpine? Because the Alpine's for sure faster than the McLaren. Yeah. And I don't know, Oscar and Lando are just not as cheeky of a pairing as I thought they'd be. I mean, they must not get along, or they must not get on very well, just because they were constantly shoving Daniel Lando content, and now, I mean, it's just like merch photos of the two of them, and that's it. It's just like, ugh.
And we know Lando likes doing content. He's always doing, even if it's just like races online and stuff. Like, he loves being in content. He's doing golf stuff all the time. But I think, it's a combination of that, and I don't know if I'm ready to say that they dislike each other. I think maybe like Oscar's a rookie. It's a lot to get into, level. And I think it's maybe they're just like not like friends.
Exactly.
I'm sure if they start getting more in the points and stuff, that would help. It's got to be just so frustrating and so just rough coming in for both of them. Like, Lando's got to be rethinking things, and then Oscar, like, you think you're going to this historic great team, and it comes in, it's just a shitbox. So tough for those guys. Happy to see Mercedes right up there. I mean, the battle for second this year is going to be fascinating. It's tough for Ferrari that they're already that far back, but I mean, that's only like 1 or 2 races that could change.
Yeah.
Like, I think some of them might have been Jenson Button was saying on the broadcast, who we both thought did amazing this weekend. We both love Jenson Button, but
yes, absolutely.
How interesting or how like incredible this season would be if Red Bull was just a little worse, or like, let's just say in a hypothetical world that Red Bull wasn't there this year, or like whatever, like the battle between Aston Martin, Mercedes, and Ferrari would be so incredible.
It would,
but we're not going to see that, and that's okay.
Hey, we can.
But
see
you never
some
know. I mean, the
improve.
upgrades are going to come. We got a month off, so
yep, exactly.
It's going to get a little closer, but we also, like I said, we haven't seen Red Bull's true pace, so I don't know.
A month away.
I know. So yeah, I have the app, this little widget on my phone that shows when the next race is.
Like 26 days, 27
26 days, 8 hours.
Yeah.
No Baku. But that actually...
7
we're going to talk
a.m.
about Baku in a minute, but we need to do our Hardo and Softie of the week
yes.
before we move on to the Baku stuff and finish off with that. Do you want to go first? You can do your Hardo and Softie? Sure, okay.
Yeah, I would say the fans got it right. People clown him a lot, but Checo, I think he did a great job. He was... he did some ballsy overtakes. And I think a lot of drivers had some really good overtakes. You know, that Max's overtake on Lewis on that curved straight was just absolutely gorgeous to watch. You know, Checo overtook so many people in that corner. He did some really gutsy overtakes, and he got up to P5. So he's gonna get my Hardo of the week. Uh-oh.
It's good. Catch with my bad thumb. Playing injured this week.
Oh no.
Okay, I'll do mine. Mine is... I'm going to give it to a split. Gasly, kind of, because he raced so well. But also, we're quick to rip on the broadcast a lot, so I'm going to give Jenson Button and F1/Sky Sports a shout-out this week, because I thought they did a really good job. There's so much going on. They're good at explaining it. And they actually showed like what was relevant in the race for the most part. Obviously, you can't capture everything, but I thought they did a really good job, and I think Jenson Button did great. So that would be my Hardo. And my Softie of the week, I'm going to let you go first, because you'll understand why. You go first for Softie.
Oh, goodness. My Softie is going to go to the red flag. You ruined it.
Yeah.
Too many red flags.
Yeah. So mine is going to go to the FIA in general as well. One for, not that this is really their fault, but the fans getting on track at the end of the race was really bad. But I guess that's not really their fault. But the main thing, I'm going to pull this picture up here. The main thing is Michael Massey. Having Michael Massey there, and I was going to go on a whole long diatribe, but I'm not going to, because it's late at night, and I don't feel like it's appropriate right now. But all the issues they had with the race, but having Michael Massey there and like rolling out the red carpet for him, he's shaking hands, he's kissing babies, he's doing pictures, he's talking to all the racers, not any Mercedes people, but that the people that were there even said like he was making the rounds talking to everyone, but didn't talk to the Mercedes people, which I guess I don't blame him for.
Ouch.
Yeah. But yeah, I just wanted to remind people, I'm not going to go into everything, but just how, so he did get basically fired afterwards, and he signed an NDA that he can't say why he made the decisions that he made during 2021 Abu Dhabi. But we have the radio messages between Jonathan Wheatley, the Red Bull radio director, and Michael Massey from that fateful moment when they decided to change all the rules in F1 to allow Max Verstappen to win the championship instead of Lewis Hamilton. Just real quickly, Jonathan Wheatley, this is the Red Bull guy, to Michael Massey, 2021 Abu Dhabi. Obviously, those lap cars, you don't need to let them go right away around and catch up at the back of the pack. FIA race director Michael Massey, understood. Jonathan Wheatley, you need to let them go. FIA race director Michael Massey, understood. Just give me 1 second. Jonathan Wheatley, you need to let them go, and then we got a motor race on our hands. FIA race director Michael Massey, understood. You know what he did right after that, as you show your Red Bull hat? He did exactly what Jonathan Wheatley asked him to do. And that, my friends, is fraudulent. Struggling to come up with the word there. Yeah, that'll never leave. That pain will never leave. But like, they can't keep bringing this guy around. They just can't.
Yeah, he's been around at he's been a couple of IndyCar races. I saw a clip online, and it might have been IndyCar. I can't for the life of me remember exactly what series it was. Actually, it may not have been IndyCar, but there was some sort of like completely unrelated to Michael Massey, but he was there as a guest, and there was some sort of like major safety car issue like happening, and they cut to him, and he just sort of like scooches out of frame, just being like,
"Oh my god,
no!"
That's great. That's a good gift. Oh my god! Imagine I didn't even really think about the fact that he was there this weekend and all that shit happened. A similar situation. So
I wonder how he would have handled it.
Oh, not well. Not well.
Probably not.
Lewis, 10-second penalty for Lewis Hamilton.
Just because. No.
Yeah, we can move on from that because I don't want to go to bed angry tonight. So we have, as we mentioned, the next race is Baku. it's a long way away. There's supposed to be, I believe, the Chinese Grand Prix, but government issues there stopped that from happening. So, yeah, a big to that one. But they were supposed to have this first sprint race of the year at Baku, and they're still going to have that. But they have made a bit of weekend format changes. There's one thing I'm curious about, though. So here's how it's going to be. F1, blah, blah, blah. It would be Friday. They have a practice session, and then the GP quali. Saturday, they have the sprint race qualifying, and then the sprint race. And then Sunday, they have the Grand Prix. So they're making 2 qualifying separate, one for the sprint race and one for the Grand Prix, which we both, I think we talked about earlier, we both think is a good idea, so the guys can actually go for it in the sprint without having to worry about it affecting their starting spot in the race. But the thing I'm kind of curious about is the order that they're doing it in. They're doing it the GP qualifying on the Friday, and then the sprint qualifying on the Saturday, and then the sprint race, and then Sunday the Grand Prix. You would think they would do the sprint qualifying first, and then the sprint race, and then the race qualifying, or the sprint race qualifying, the race qualifying, and then, like, it's just weird that the order they're doing it in.
That's so fucking weird.
Like, doing the GP qualifying first after they've only had one practice session. I don't know. That's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. It kind of doesn't make sense because it's like Friday you can just stop watching. It's like you're just. I mean, Saturday is sprint day. I guess that's what they want. But I guess Friday, if it was sprint qualifying, I guess what they don't want is for there to be. Well, I guess there's going to be 2 qualifyings back to back anyways, so I don't know.
Yeah, like they could have done. I think they should have done. Ideally, it would be Friday practice session and then sprint race qualifying. Saturday they do. I think it would be cool to start with the sprint race, then have a break, and then do the GP qualifying after. But I think that'd be coolest. But at least have the GP qualifying second. Maybe they'll change that. I don't know. But that was the only thing that kind of struck me. Otherwise, I like it. I like that they're doing it, especially because Baku's not a very good track, really, for a sprint race. At least it doesn't seem like it will be. You never really know until they do it.
Not at all.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it will be. But I guess we'll find out. But yeah, that's sort of a strange little wrinkle to it. But again, we'll see what happens. We know Max doesn't like any of these changes. He's already threatened to leave F1.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't hate. But yeah.
He could.
In
2028,
pretty much all. 2020, after he wins a few in a row, he can tip his cap and go on to some other sort of racing.
There's no way Red Bull's letting him go in that contract early. No way.
True. That is true. Christian Horner would not. It's his golden boy. I think Christian Horner's going to retire when Max Verstappen retires.
I could see it. I definitely could see it. I mean, what? Oh, God. That is going to be so impossible to root for Red Bull once that happens, man. Just, so sad. It's
funny because I feel the opposite. Maybe I'll... That's what's going to make it maybe possible. Maybe I'll be okay with Red Bull after that.
Dude, maybe Lando becomes the new golden boy of Red Bull. You never know. Oh, that was...
He kind of suits it.
Circle back to my point. Point. Because you said that they're planning on potentially selling AlphaTauri.
Yes.
That is for sure going to happen, I think. Because if you really think about it, the whole point of AlphaTauri is to develop young drivers to become Red Bull drivers. But they've only done that one time since Max, and it hasn't worked again since Max. And I mean, they did it 2 times, and they got rid of those guys pretty quickly, especially Gasly. So Checo, they just plucked out of off a whim, replaced Albon. So I could definitely see that happening. So I'm so glad that I was able to think of that because it would have driven me crazy.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be interesting where it goes, but I'm sure we'll got more news on that as it comes up. But yeah, we got a long ways to go to the next race, but I don't know. Everyone always seems to, whenever these breaks come up, there always seems to be drama and all the stuff that always fills the void. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this week.
Yes, we're gonna for sure keep doing episodes in the off weeks.
Absolutely.
Just getting us hyped for the return of F1. It feels like this race felt like the true season opener. F1's finally back, and it's taken away from us just as quick as it came. So I'm very excited because Baku is one of my favorite tracks to play in the game, and Miami is also a favorite of mine. I'm very excited for them to go back, and that's right after Baku. So I'm very excited. Even though it's probably going to be, the same story, I am also hoping that, some teams are able to find some improvements. Maybe Red Bull get a little overconfident. I hope they just stop development of their car right now. I think that they legitimately could focus on next year. You never know. So just hope we say this every fucking week, but I just hope we see a little more competition at the front.
Absolutely. That's all we can hope for.
Yep.
All right.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay.
Get us out of here.
All right. We covered everything. It was a crazy weekend, but thank you all so much for listening and watching. We'll see you next week. Check out our socials at HarderSoft F1, and we are HarderSoft Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and YouTube. Boom.